Picture this. You are staring at your bank statement, and there is actually money left over after paying your bills. I know it sounds like science fiction, but bear with me. Now, you are faced with a choice that could literally determine whether you retire sipping cocktails on a beach or eating ramen noodles in your studio apartment at 75. Should you throw that extra cash at your debts like you were playing financial whack-a-mole? Or should you invest it and let compound interest work its magic while you sleep? This is not just some casual weekend decision like choosing between Netflix and Hulu. This single choice could mean the difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, maybe even millions if you play your cards right. And here is the kicker. Most people make this decision based on gut feeling rather than actual math, which is about as effective as using a magic 8-ball to plan your retirement. Before we dive into this epic battle between debt elimination and wealth building, let me hit you with some reality. We are not talking about whether to pay off your credit card debt from that shopping spree where you convinced yourself you needed 17 different phone cases. We are talking about the strategic decision that separates people who build real wealth from those who spend their entire lives making other people rich through interest payments. The truth is, there is no universal right answer here, which is probably why your brain hurts every time you think about it. But there are some fundamental principles that can guide you toward the choice that makes the most sense for your specific situation. And yes, your situation is probably more unique than you think, even if you feel like you are just another face in the crowd of financial mediocrity. Here is what most people do not realize. When you pay off debt, you are essentially earning a guaranteed return equal to the interest rate on that debt. Think about it this way. If you have a credit card charging you 22% interest and you pay it off, that is like earning a risk-free 22% return on your money. Try finding that kind of guaranteed return in the stock market. Go ahead, I will wait. This is where things get interesting though. The stock market has historically averaged around 10% annually over long periods. Notice I said historically and over long periods because the market does not care about your timeline or your feelings. Some years it gives you 30% returns, and other years it takes away 38% of your money just to keep things spicy. So here is the million-dollar question, literally. Does it make sense to pay off a debt with a 5% interest rate when you could potentially earn 10% in the market? The math seems obvious, right? 5% guaranteed versus 10% potential equals invest the money and profit the difference. But if math were the only factor in financial decisions, we would all be driving sensible cars and eating rice and beans every meal. The reality is that risk changes everything. When you pay down debt, you are getting that guaranteed return I mentioned earlier. There is no market crash that can take away the interest you are no longer paying. There is no economic recession that can reduce the psychological benefit of having one less payment to worry about each month. It is boring, predictable, and absolutely guaranteed. Investing, on the other hand, is like dating someone who is absolutely amazing when things are going well, but might completely disappear when you need them most. The returns can be spectacular, but they come with the very real possibility of watching your money evaporate faster than your motivation to exercise in January. This hits different when you realize that the stock market is essentially a beautiful but unpredictable partner who promises you the world but might leave you heartbreaking during the worst possible moments. The wealthy think differently about this. They understand that both debt payoff and investing have their place, but timing and strategy matter more than emotions. The advantages of understanding this debt versus investment choice can change your entire future. Subscribe to Grow With Me as we dive deeper into the real numbers that will blow your mind. Let me paint you a picture with some real numbers, because nothing makes financial concepts clearer like seeing actual dollars at work. Imagine you have got a mortgage for $350,000 at 4% interest over 30 years. Your monthly payment is sitting around $1,670, and you have managed to scrape together an extra $1,000 each month that you could either throw at the mortgage or invest. If you decide to channel your inner debt warrior and attack that mortgage with the extra $1,000 per month, you will be mortgage-free in about 14 and a half years instead of 30. That is cutting your debt timeline in half, which feels pretty incredible. You will also save yourself from paying about $140,000 in interest over the original loan term. Not too shabby for some extra monthly payments. But here is where it gets really interesting. Once you are debt-free in that 14 and a half years, you now have both your original extra $1,000 plus your former mortgage payment of $1,670 to invest each month. That is $2,670 monthly going straight into investments for the remaining 15 and a half years of our 30-year timeline. Running those numbers through the investment calculator, assuming that 10% average return, you would end up with roughly $1 million. Subtract the interest you did not pay because you killed the mortgage early, and you are looking at about $1 million in total wealth after 30 years. Not bad, right? But before you start planning your early retirement party, let me tell you what really happens if you take the opposite approach. What if you make the minimum mortgage payment and invest that extra $1,000 from day one? This is where compound interest starts flexing like it just joined a gym. By investing that $1,000 monthly for the full 30 years while making minimum mortgage payments, your investment account grows to approximately $2 million. $2 million. Yes, you will pay about $250,000 in mortgage interest over those 30 years, which stings a little. But even after accounting for that interest expense, you are still sitting pretty with about $1.9 million in total wealth. That is a difference of roughly $800,000 between the two strategies. $800,000. That is not pocket change we are talking about here. Now, there is something important to watch out for. The mortgage example is actually one of the more extreme cases when it comes to this debt versus investment decision. Mortgages typically offer some of the lowest interest rates available to regular humans, often barely above the rate of inflation. This makes them what I like to call good debt, if such a thing can exist. It is money borrowed at such reasonable rates that smart investors actually want to keep these loans around as long as possible. What I am about to share might surprise you. Some financial experts get genuinely excited about 30-year mortgages because they are not just borrowing money, they are borrowing today's expensive dollars and paying them back with tomorrow's cheaper dollars. Here is something most people do not think about when they are running these calculations in their heads at 3 in the morning. Inflation is quietly working in your favor when you have fixed-rate debt. That mortgage payment of $1,670 feels pretty hefty today. But in 20 years, it is going to feel like pocket change. Why? Because inflation makes everything more expensive except your mortgage payment, which stays frozen in time like a financial fossil. Think about what you paid for a cup of coffee 10 years ago versus today. Your mortgage payment does not get that memo about price increases. In 15 years, you will be paying that same $1,670 with money that is worth significantly less than it is today. It is like paying back a loan with monopoly money, except it is completely legal and the bank cannot do anything about it. But let me pump the brakes on this mortgage example because not all debt is created equal. If we are talking about credit card debt, the entire conversation changes faster than your mood when you see your credit card statement. Credit cards do not mess around with their interest rates. They will charge you 18, 22, sometimes even 29% interest, which is basically financial highway robbery with a smile. When you are dealing with high-interest debt, the math becomes crystal clear. There is no investment strategy on the planet that can consistently and safely beat credit card interest rates. Sure, you might get lucky with some hot stock tip from your cousin who thinks he is the next Warren Buffett, but you're more likely to lose your shirt than beat those credit card rates consistently. Student loans occupy this weird middle ground in the debt universe. They often carry moderate interest rates, somewhere between your mortgage and your credit cards. Plus, they come with tax deductions that effectively lower your real interest rate even further. Some student loans are sitting at 3 or 4% interest, which puts them in that questionable zone where investing might make sense. But here is the twist no one talks about with student loans. Unlike your mortgage, you cannot write off the interest on most student loans beyond a certain income level. And unlike your house, your education cannot be repossessed if times get tough, which sounds great until you realize it also means you cannot sell it to get out from under the debt. Car loans present yet another fascinating case study in the debt versus investment debate. Most car loans hover somewhere between 4 and 8% interest, depending on your credit score and how much the dealer thinks they can get away with. But here is the thing about cars. They are depreciating assets, which means they are losing value faster than your motivation to go to the gym after New Year's. So when you are making extra payments on a car loan, you are essentially paying more money to own something that is becoming less valuable every single day. It is like paying premium prices to watch a movie that gets worse every time you watch it. From a purely mathematical standpoint, it often makes more sense to invest that extra money and let the car depreciate at its own pace, while your investments hopefully appreciate. Now, let me tell you what really happens when we factor in something that makes this entire decision even more complicated: your timeline and life stage. If you are 25 years old with steady income and decades until retirement, you can probably afford to take more risk with your money. Market crashes sting, but you have plenty of time to recover. You can ride out the volatility and potentially reap those higher long-term returns. But if you are 55 and starting to think seriously about retirement, those market crashes hit differently. You do not have decades to recover from a major downturn. Suddenly, the guaranteed return of paying off debt starts looking a lot more attractive than the potential volatility of market investments. Here is another factor that most people completely ignore when making this decision: the emergency fund reality check. Before you even think about whether to pay off debt or invest, you need to have some cash sitting around, doing absolutely nothing except looking pretty in your savings account. I know. Watching money earn 0.1% interest while inflation laughs at you feels about as productive as teaching your goldfish calculus. But here is the thing. If you do not have an emergency fund and your car decides to transform into an expensive paperweight, guess what happens to your brilliant debt payoff strategy or your investment portfolio? You are either pulling money out of investments at the worst possible time, or you are adding more debt to the pile you are trying to eliminate. Now, let me dive into something that makes this decision even more interesting: the tax implications that most people discover about as often as they discover a $20 bill in their old jeans. When you pay off debt, especially mortgage debt, you might be giving up some tax benefits. Mortgage interest is often tax deductible, which means Uncle Sam is essentially subsidizing part of your housing costs. Pay off that mortgage early and you lose that deduction. But before you get too excited about keeping debt for tax purposes, remember that getting a tax deduction means you are spending money to save money. It is like being excited about a 50% off sale when you are buying something you do not actually need. This is where tax-advantaged accounts like 401ks and IRAs become absolute game changers. If your employer offers a 401k match, contributing enough to get the full match is basically free money. It is like your boss saying, "Hey, for every dollar you save for retirement, I will give you 50 cents. Only a financial masochist would turn down free money. The research reveals that investment taxes are their own special kind of headache, but long-term capital gains rates are often lower than regular income tax rates. So that 10% return you are earning might be more like 8% after taxes, which changes your debt versus investment calculations completely. Let me tell you what really happens when behavioral psychology meets perfectly logical financial plans. You can run all the numbers you want, but if you cannot stick to the plan, the math becomes irrelevant faster than a smartphone from 2010. Some people are natural debt haters. They see that balance and it haunts them like a bad breakup. These folks will sacrifice potential investment gains just to sleep peacefully at night without debt hanging over their heads. And you know what? There is nothing wrong with that. Peace of mind has value that does not show up in spreadsheets. Other people are comfortable with debt as long as the numbers work in their favor. They will carry a mortgage at 4% while investing in assets that hopefully earn more than that. Here is something that might surprise you about the investing versus debt payoff debate. Inflation can completely flip the script on what seems like the obvious choice. We have been living through a period of relatively low inflation for so long that many people forgot it exists. But when inflation starts heating up, fixed-rate debt becomes your best friend, while cash becomes your worst enemy. During high inflation periods, your debt payments become cheaper over time, while your investments, especially in assets like real estate and stocks, tend to keep pace with or exceed inflation. This is when carrying debt stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like a strategic advantage. You are essentially being paid to borrow money, which sounds too good to be true, but is exactly what happens when inflation exceeds your interest rate. Let me address the elephant in the room. What happens when your best-laid plans meet reality, and reality wins? Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at your financial strategy, right when you think you have got everything figured out. Maybe you lose your job, get divorced, have a medical emergency, or decide to completely change careers and go back to school. This is why timing matters so much in this decision. The sooner you understand this, the better prepared you will be when unexpected challenges arise. After years of studying this, I have learned that flexibility in your financial strategy is just as important as having the right numbers. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when life forced you to change your financial plans. I will answer as many as I can. So here is the bottom line. Whether you should pay off debt or invest is not a question with a one-size-fits-all answer. It depends entirely on your situation, your debt interest rates, your risk tolerance, and your timeline. High-interest debt, attack it like it owes you money. Low-interest debt, maybe let it stick around while your investments do the heavy lifting. The truth is, the biggest financial mistake is spending so much time planning the perfect strategy that you never actually execute any strategy at all. Right now, as we speak, compound interest is either working for you or against you. Every day you wait to make this decision is a day you are not optimizing your financial future. Take a moment right now to look at your debts and their interest rates. Compare them to potential investment returns. Consider your age, your risk tolerance, and your peace of mind. Then pick a strategy and stick with it. Like this video for your feedback if you got any value from this video.